Right. Okay, so we're joined tonight by four members of the Ontario Provincial Police. What I'll do, I think, is I'll introduce Dufferin OPP Detachment Commander Inspector Terry Ward. And Inspector Ward, I'll let you introduce your colleagues and then take us through the presentation from there.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for having us here today to try and set the record straight as to the way things are being handled. I'll just do quick introductions. On my left is Acting Staff Sergeant from Dufferin, Steve Phillips. On my far right is Acting Staff Sergeant Mike Acton and Provincial Constable Jen Roach. They're both with the OPP's Provincial Liaison Team. And I'm not even gonna try to get into what they do, but they're here to basically give an explanation on how we handle these sort of events nationally. This isn't something that Shelburne's any different than anywhere else in the province. And we don't have the luxury, being police, to deal with perception. Right? And I mean, a lot of people in Dufferin County are on Facebook and different types of social media, and there's lots of opinions and perception out there. When it comes to the law, we don't have perception. We can't police by perception. And that's what seems to be the little bit of a breakdown as to what people perceive is happening and what is actually happening. So at that point, I'll turn it over to Acting Staff and go ahead.
All right, sounds good. Again, Mike Acton, Staff Sergeant, the Indigenous Policing Bureau out of GHQ, Aurelia, and I head up the Provincial Liaison Team unit within that bureau. So I've been doing this for about 18 years. I have a vast amount of experience with demonstrations, most being in California. So I'll get right down to it with the Freedom Movement / Convoy community. So we've been dealing with that community for about a year and a half. And it has, again, as Inspector Ward said, national implications with these demonstrations. So as we saw demonstrations happen across Canada, but we'll bring it down to Ontario, that being in Windsor, Sarnia, Bridges both, and of course Ottawa, and all points in between. So to deal with this community and any other demonstrating community, we follow what we have as a framework. And our framework is for police preparedness for Indigenous critical incidents. I know how that sounds, but it is actually flexible to Indigenous and non-Indigenous issues, demonstrations. So what that framework does, it's a flexible approach to demonstrations. That's we'll just keep it in that context. And it allows the OPP to deal with these issues and events in a chronological way, maximizing the public safety issue and minimizing the use of force by police. So this framework has been adopted nationally. The Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police have adopted this nationally for demonstrations and activities such as that. So this is the approach that is taken across Canada and bringing it down into Ontario. It's the OPP's framework, one of 18 critical framework policies. So the question was, why isn't there a greater police presence, if I'm correct in saying that? Correct.
Yeah, that was one. Yeah.
So what happens in these events? Inspector Ward actually utilizes his assets the way he should. So he has assets of, frontline road officers. Frontline road officers police Dufferin County. So when something like this happens, these events, he makes a phone call to my bureau, me, and I set to putting a team on ground. What that team does, they do pre-work up on these demonstrations. And this, again, as Inspector Ward says, this isn't unique to Shelburne whatsoever. We deal with every county within Ontario. Same things happen all the time. But we have seen a sharp decline. And that has a lot of reasons that we've seen sharp declines all over Ontario. But what this unit will do is they're sent in to Shelburne by myself and the regional coordinator, and they manage the issue. They manage and mitigate and mediate. So basically, they're given ground rules as to their rights, which also is enshrined in our framework and the national framework. And of course, we watch the rights for everybody, not just demonstrators. We watch the rights for all the stakeholders in the town of Shelburne, if we can say that. What they do is they basically monitor the event, which allows inspector awards to people to actually do the frontline police work that we're here to do. My unit has this in their mandate that we deal with this. It's our area. We're the subject matter experts. So this is why you might not see a uniform officer directly in the area. I'll have to throw myself under the bus on that one, because I prefer not to have uniform members in the area if it's not contentious. If it gets contentious, my employees are told, Jen does a very good job at this, that if there's something not right, we will have uniformed officers come. If there's a criminal act, uniformed officers will attend and they will investigate. If there's a provincial offense, uniformed officers will attend and they will investigate. Now, it doesn't mean that charges have to be laid right then and there. We have all seen that on a traffic stop. We can lay summonses if there's an issue that way, and it's not the appropriate time to lay the charge, then we will move on and lay a summons. However, I don't think to this point that we have had any provincial or criminal offenses identified. So, but I do understand that there was some bylaws infringed, which again, the bylaw will lay the charge and it will go before the courts. So that is the way I like to actually run a demonstration on our end, because it's been my experience that demonstrators, they're more open and actually cooperative with suggestions and asks of please clear the sidewalk, please stay off the road. And they're not having a uniform member tell them to do so. But if it comes down to that and they block a road, block a sidewalk, and they will not move, we will deal with it the way we're going to deal with it according to law, plain and simple. So anyway, the framework, like I said, this is what it does. So the way I run my units is basically that of the framework. We keep that in mind all the time. And that framework, again, has adopted national. And now we are finding municipalities that have, and this wonderful lady here that brought it up, 26 protests. She's not wrong. It's a lot. However, we are now, my unit is educating all municipalities in provincial liaison work. So we have to send them through the course because they are finding, 26 protests in Shelburne would be that of 26 protests in 2 weeks at a hospital in a bigger center. So they are finding that they need the work of liaison people. Now, this comes at there was an inquiry into the convoys and the Windsor issue. Of that inquiry, some of the recommendations, one of the recommendations was that all police services in Canada could have a liaison team. So therefore, it set us off onto a tangent of educating all police services, small, large, and our own people within Ontario. And believe it or not, it's going to be Australia. I just wrote to that the other day. So this framework, it works. I've been at it for 18 years. And again, some of our most contentious issues with road blockages. I'm sure we've all heard of Caledonia. I've been there again from the onstart to present. And our framework has been put in place now, which has actually alleviated some of the issues that have arose and haven't come to fruition. But we have to keep in mind the charter and the rights of the charter. People do have the right to peaceful demonstration, and they also have the right to free speech, opinion, etc. So we do have that enshrined in the framework, and it is accessible to the public. They can read it. And I will give that link to you that you can have a look. But that's basically what we're doing. And we have to allow people their right to demonstrate within the safety of the community and the law.
So I'll maybe hold off on more substantive questions until the end. I don't know if there's any more in terms of the presentation, but just a question for clarification.
Sure.
You'd mentioned that we've seen a sharp decline. I wasn't sure declined in what.
Oh, in demonstrations regarding the freedom movement and convoy.
Provincially, or nationally.
Nationally, but more so, yes, provincially.
Okay.
So municipalities used to have demonstrations such as these, and it's taken a sharp decline. And there's a lot of the demonstrators have chosen to move their venues to Parliament and Queen's Park.
Inspector Ward, was there more you wanted to add, or you want to
I don't think so.
open it up for
At the end of
questions?
the day, the other question is, what is our plan moving forward? Our plan isn't changing. We're gonna stay, we're gonna protect the peace and the rights of both sides. And we're there to investigate should a criminal offense or a conventional offense take place. But to date, it's been peaceful. And there's no reason to think that it's gonna be anything other than that. But we're still gonna have Mike is still engaged. The question is moving forward, why don't we see more police officers? It's kind of a basis of what Mike said, right? Sometimes to have that visual piece there, it gives the community that public safety aspect, but at the same time, it can incite more on the demonstration side to have that uniform piece there. So it's to find that happy medium. And you got to remember that it becomes resource heavy and monetarily heavy to have those uniform numbers there constantly, when really are they necessary? That's the question. Are they necessary? Because again, PLT is going to be there and they're going to engage. And if they see something that they think is a breach or is a breach, they're going to engage the uniform at that point to come in. So just to have them standing around for the public perception, I don't know, these are the questions that come back to you as council, and how deep do you want it?
Yeah, and I think that's an important point. I mean, something that you and I have spoken about in the past. One of the concerns that I hear regularly from members of the community is that, on the Saturdays when these demonstrations are taking place, they avoid the downtown core because they don't want to have to be confronted. They don't want to have to walk through the crowd. Particularly, it seems elderly people don't want to walk through there. And unfortunately, our only pharmacy downtown is adjacent to the location where the demonstrators have chosen to do this. So I guess it does become a bit of a balancing act. I understand what you're saying in terms of potentially inciting the demonstrators to, do something further if there's a larger police presence. But I think the flip side of that perhaps is, from a public safety point of view, members of our public may feel more secure, may feel more safe walking through that, frequenting the downtown, if there's a uniform presence and they know that somebody's around to sort of look after them if something goes sideways.
Yeah, but I mean, the message to get out there is they will be looked after if something goes sideways. Just because they see the OPP crest, right? As Mike explained, there are police and they are monitoring and they are walking up and down the street to see if anybody impedes them. They are there. It's just a matter of that whole perception piece that you see the crest and everything's good. I related back and like that's the Friday the 13th, right? You don't see the locals go downtown on Friday the 13th. Wasaga Beach is another one, right? On the long weekends, the locals don't go downtown in Wasaga Beach. And I'm not saying this is what we're going to accomplish, but with new populations and new growth come new problems.
Yeah,
And I mean, this council certainly well aware of that with the growth that we've seen. I mean, I would have to say, I don't think it's a reasonable position to take to say that our locals can't go downtown every other weekend.
I'm just saying that it's something to be cognizant of, right?
and there, and council, I would throw out there too, that my team step outside of our mandate all the time. We are about demonstrations, strikes, land issues, land claims, ... So that is something, now that if you say that to me, that my team can actually work on with that portion of your community and the actual growth. There's ways and means, and we can even have an info session if you want with that kind of a community. Come on out, have a talk, you can meet the officers, whatever it takes. Because we're here to service your community, as every other community in Ontario. I kind of like Terry, so.
Yeah, well, I mean, I certainly appreciate the efforts that the PLT team has done, and I mean, I've mentioned this before informally, that I think, you know, but for the efforts that have been made by, you know, PC Roach and you know, her colleagues, I think the lid may have blown off of this thing long before now. So I mean, that certainly has to be recognized. The meeting on February 27th, when this sort of first came to light and eventually led to the resolution asking you folks to join us tonight, I listed kind of in brief a summary of the concerns that, you know, seem to keep percolating. And these are concerns that I'm getting from members of the public, and I'm sure that they go, you know, or it goes without saying that my colleagues have received similar ones. So I'll just run through the list again briefly so that you're aware of them. Occupation of the park to the exclusion of other members of the community, obstructing, interfering with the flow of traffic, people approaching moving vehicles, walking onto the street, jaywalking, loud noise, loud music, shouting, obscene language, either being shouted or displayed through flags and signs, occupying parking spaces in our public lots to the exclusion of other downtown patrons, using private washrooms inside business establishments, and people being aggressive or confrontational to the shop owners when they're told that washrooms are only for customers. A general feeling, as I mentioned, of intimidation by some members of the public to walk through this crowd. Loss or decline of business, which has been experienced by a number of business owners. And one of the other concerns, which I do want to highlight, is the concern that I think there's a real potential that some frustrated members of the public, you know, in feeling as though there isn't being action taken or isn't being enough action taken, may decide at some point in time that enough is enough. And they're going to do something on their own. And I'll be very clear on this. I mean, you know, I can't point to any one individual or any one group of individuals to say that on this date, they're going to show up and do something. But I will say very clearly that, you know, having sort of a sense of the community that I do, and that I think many of my colleagues do, I do think this community is quickly approaching sort of a critical boiling point. And there is a frustration that is palpable. And my concern is that if something isn't done to sort of stem the tide of this, then we're going to reach that point. And at that point, I think we're going to be confronting a much larger issue than we have been, you know, to date.
I could speak to the perception of the police presence downtown during. I follow this.
Just so it's picked up on YouTube.
I follow this pretty closely online, and a lot of people make comments as they drive through town. Well, I know how many people we have in these beds because I employ them. So if someone's driving through town, they wouldn't necessarily see perhaps our officers. But I know the last two events, we had 3 extra officers in addition to our zone cars that were there. So at least 5 uniform members in addition to PLT. So there is a presence. It's greater than I think maybe the public sees. And I think that's important to get out there, that we do have uniform officers in town at these events. But again, the whole objective of PLT and UP is to handle these things as peacefully as we possibly can. We don't want confrontation with anyone. We have to keep the charter, like they said, they've got rights to protest peacefully. So far, what we've learned is they've been very cooperative to deal with Jen as far as when they set up, when they tear down, they kind of keep to the timeframes. Signage, they have a right to have signs, right? And they have the right to express their opinions on the signs. Whether we like it or not, whether it's annoyance or not, that's a right. What I can speak to as far as anybody else taking up any type of criminality against a group, our goal is the same, is to keep the peace. So those people who are dealt with, if a criminal offense happens, we will take the appropriate action investigation. So that's how I would answer that. If there's another group that's interested in, having a confrontation, we can certainly deal with that as well.
And maybe capitalizing on that too. I mean, there's not meetings, and if I can work with staff, Phillips and Inspector Ward about, loosening my grip on my people will handle it, so they can be out in public and do the work that needs to be done in public, while we deal with the event at the time. Of course, we can, come up with something more uniform police presence, but at any given time, we have 2 or 3 of our members. We monitor it every weekend. If I need to have somebody deployed from my team, again, the police officers, if I need to deploy more people, I'll deploy more people. I have a plethora of people at my disposal, up to 120. So we can deal with anything that the town needs, demonstrators present to us, and council.
And I think it's important too to know that we do emphasize with the community. It's gotta be annoying, it's gotta be hard. It's funny though, and I see this a lot in Dufferin County, that instead of calling us when they have a problem or a complaint, and I'm not just dealing with the demonstration either, they seem to want to go to Facebook or social media or call their local counselor, right? And unfortunately, last time, I don't think I've seen anybody here strap on a gun belt and deal with that kind of stuff. That's our job. So my message is pretty strongly, and I've said this since I came to Dufferin County. If you need the police, call the police. Don't call your local counselor and expect them to be your voice and be the person that comes and jumps in to rescue you. If someone has an issue going on, especially with the demonstration, call the police and we will respond and we'll look at it. We'll see if there is grounds to lay a charge there, or if there's grounds to do anything. As of late, of the 26 events that we've been a part of, I think we've maybe had 4 calls for service.
Yeah, that's correct. We get the on-call for service from people that are driving through and are complaining because they're seeing the protests. We're not getting anything that we can action. We got a call for service this past weekend regarding indecent exposure. We had 4 officers investigating that immediately and found that there was absolutely no grounds for any criminal charge, that it did not happen the way that it came in. We found no grounds for charge, therefore no charges were made. Inspector Ward and staff acting are both correct in that we can have as many resources as we need. I've been at a multitude of these. I'm there in plain clothes. I'm I guess I'm not in view of the public, but I am there as a police presence. I'm a police officer that can take action if needed. I haven't had to take action yet. I haven't. There were some obscene signs. I had a discussion with the organizers. Those signs are not there anymore. We've got 2 signs that maybe cross the line of what might be family friendly, but again, it's freedom of expression. There wasn't a hate sign or anything like that. You can't stomp on someone's freedom of expression. Sidewalks being blocked, I had no trouble walking through on a sidewalk. I haven't. Sheer numbers of people, not people doing it out of spite or anything else. At some of the larger protests. I haven't seen anybody being confronted or anything. There's been some issues at Caravaggio seems to take the brunt of it, but that has been dealt with. And this weekend, I don't believe there's anybody in front of the drugstore. We are dealing with things as they arise, and that's what we do, rather than stepping in and taking a heavy-handed approach, because our mandate is to decrease the use of force. We have a discussion, and those discussions are never met with any type of argument. If we have an issue, it's taken care of. So I don't believe that numbers of police are going to change anything that's happening. I do understand that the average citizen may feel more safe if they see a uniform. But like Inspector Ward said, that there's nothing happening that would alter that.
I do appreciate, Inspector Ward, your comment about people directing concerns to council. And I mean, you know, I think probably all 7 of us up here can share some of that frustration, because the community is looking to us to sort of solve this problem. And as you say, I mean, we don't wear badges, we don't wear a gun. Contrary to what some people seem to think, you know, we don't command a local army or militia. You know, this is a police matter, and that's one of the reasons you were asked to come here tonight, so that people could hear directly from you folks. One of the issues, though, I think might be, and you spoke about the lack of calls for service, particularly with respect to business owners. One of the things that has been mentioned is that they're reluctant to call in complaints because they do fear reprisal. And I know that there's been some efforts to sort of reach out to business owners. Have you received feedback, you know, without getting into specifics, but generally, like, what is the sense of business owners?
I do not have one business owner make a comment that they have fear of reprisal. Nobody commented that anything criminal or intimidating happened. There were businesses that said that they did feel that their business had declined. I did discuss that with the demonstration organizer, and I know there's been efforts made to kind of work on that with some of the businesses. Most people do respect that they do have the right to demonstrate. But yes, there has been a noticeable decline in some people's businesses. Some of the businesses had absolutely no issue with anything that was going on. Like, there really was no middle of the road, but there is no one that had any fear of reprisal if they felt the need to call the police, and they were reminded to call the police if they needed to.
I'll open it up. Any other questions from members of council? Councillor Fegan?
This question probably isn't directed more at the OPP, but probably more to staff. A lot of the complaints that we're receiving are bylaw. And my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, bylaw stands, it's the jurisdiction of our bylaw officers, not the OPP. Correct. So the question that I have to staff is, how often do we have our bylaw officer at these demonstrations?
Through the mayor, we have one bylaw officer who's in attendance on Saturday. He was not for a few because he was off on paternity leave. But we do issue tickets through the bylaws that we have, whatever order, and those go through the POA court. If they're challenged, they go through that process. So our only tools available for us are charges under that fine schedule. And again, the POA is the process. And there has been many issuances of tickets under many different bylaw infractions.
Anybody else? Councilor Bernardo?
A question I have is a little bit different. If the park is rented by someone and protesters set up in the park, even though it's been rented by a person, is that a trespass? Do you think you would act as a criminal offense at that point?
Well, I think right off the bat, what would happen is Inspector Ward would engage my teams. And we would actually have to figure out the parameters of renting the park, what that meant. Does that mean the whole perimeter of the park? I just don't know what that is. We'll just say it is. And if demonstrators and or anybody else in the general public with 10 people showed up at that venue and it's been rented by a family, then they would be asked to leave. And if they don't, they would be arrested under the TPA. And if they continued, you'd have to look at a mischief charge, that being unlawful, engaging in unlawful activity, loss of enjoyment of property. So that would be the mischief angle of it. But again, that's the enforcement side of things, and we would try to mitigate that to make sure they leave. And yeah.
I actually have, we kind of made a contingency for this, if someone has it rented or wants to rent it on the day that, would typically be a demonstration day, I would let the organizer know that that's going on, and we would work on just not having that issue come to fruition.
So from a practical point of view, park rental bookings come through town hall. If we're made aware of a booking on a protest day, let you know and you'll get to work on that. Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, just to clarify, Mr. Donato, it wouldn't be a criminal offense. It's still a provincial offense to trespass the Property Act. And the person would be given the right to leave on their own as a caution first, which most times people do. Then in short of that, they can be arrested and issued a trespass ticket. So that is the process that would happen. But and it's pretty rare you go from trespass Property Act issue without repeated continuation of that offense. So it would be a stretch, and I have consulted with the local head Crown attorney in relation to, I ran some scenarios by her in relation to what's been going on downtown. And as far as even language, and it was pretty clear that any type of cause disturbance that we're seeing down there is on a very light end of a cause disturbance and wouldn't necessarily hold enough weight to lay a charge. It certainly wouldn't make it meet the test for it.
So if I could ask a few questions, you had said in the presentation that there were absolutely no charges laid in the past. Is that correct?
Do you mean criminal and provincial?
Any.
Well, that's up to your bylaw. If the bylaw charges have been made, then we've just heard that, yes, they've been made.
Okay, like criminal or otherwise, so
No.
no obstruction of intersections, no obstruction of sight lines.
No, sir.
Okay, how many warnings have you been issued?
Well, what happens is when they're on the sidewalk, they're warned to get off the sidewalk, or they will be charged accordingly.
Okay, so it's, so how many times does a group need to be warned on a bi-weekly basis to stay off the roadways and not create visual obstructions around corners before they understand that that's.
So first off, how many times has it been a visual obstruction to cars?
Are you familiar with complaints?
Yes.
Complaints?
Yes,
Have they called the police?
I'm not aware of the call, but I've witnessed myself.
So have you called the police?
Yes.
And what happened?
The very next week, the same thing happened. There's flags, there's banners, there's visual instructions.
I know everyone is saying, I'm expecting us to take a heavy hand on this. It's not gonna happen. I can tell you that right now. Our job is to keep the peace.
Understood.
And that's what we are gonna do from an OPP standpoint. we are gonna keep the peace.
Understood. Okay, be that as it may. Okay, by taking that approach, and not, there's certain liberties being taken. Oh, we're just gonna get another warning and move on. Maybe the police aren't gonna do anything about it, you know, these things, they're just gonna warn us. Do you understand? So, and I'm not trying to be confrontational in any way, because I know you guys have a tough job.
I just want to clarify a question, so through your worship. Are you saying that like we're watching things happen and just not doing anything about it?
No, what I'm saying is that the small stuff that is being let slid, when I say that okay, we're not gonna take a heavy hand on this issue or, you know, jaywalking or obstructing intersections. Does that not give the participants the perception that, hey, well, the OPP are going to let us get away with this to begin with? And does it not also give the perception to the general public that the police aren't as engaged as they should be?
Right.
So it's a double-edged sword in that.
I understand what you're saying. Absolutely, yeah. So, I guess mediating and mitigating that issue, should be brought forth, of course, to the demonstrators and maybe some parameters set. I don't believe there's been any, MVCs in the area. And I don't know of multiple complaints as such, but, I mean, we can look into that. But, I think, mediating it at that measured approach and maybe coming up with, again, now that if you see this issue, we move back a couple of feet, whatever it is, you know, to see if we can work with that issue. The last thing we would like to see is, again, I get what you're saying, it's a safety issue.
Yeah.
And we don't want, the best way to say
I don't want you to do it with jackboots and.
Nope.
Right.
Nope, not saying that.
No.
But-
But the other hand is the perception is, are you being a little too loud?
Okay, yeah, I
You know,
see what you're
same
saying.
thing.
But you know what, when you're in our business and you're mediating, a peaceful resolution for the day.
Yeah.
The last thing you want is for an ominous kind of outside, influence that latches onto something that people are trying to demonstrate their rights. And an outside influence. I'm kind of speaking in tongues here.
No,
You don't need that.
Yeah.
Especially with this kind of an issue, seen it a million times. And to mitigate,
no.
and to mitigate it and mediate it.
Yeah.
Yes, for us, it's the best approach, but if it's getting into a safety concern for the public, then yeah, we need to, and then we've had a few calls for service on it, and we should look at it.
As a former high school teacher,
Oh,
I understand all about the escalator.
yes, you would.
Okay, having said that, there is a vaccine clinic on Wednesday.
Okay.
At the Dufferin Oaks.
I can speak to that.
Okay. And there was a call on Facebook by the organizer to show up at what's essentially a seniors residence for 160 people plus health care workers plus support staff to visit.
So, if I may, I spoke to the head administrator today over there, because we were aware of that potential. And she sent me an email giving us the authority to act on behalf of Dufferin Oaks and the Melwood Center as our authority given through them to have trespassers asked to leave. And if they're not, it's a bit of a different situation, it's private property, we can arrest them, take them out of there. They've given us that right to act on their behalf. So that we're well aware of.
Oh, okay, that's fine. That was the concern. I don't think, I think the last thing that our seniors is to have something like that visited upon them
We couldn't agree with you more.
Just a point of clarification, if I could, Staff Sergeant Acton. In terms of the framework and in listening to your response to Councillor Gushardi, you talked about seeking a peaceful resolution to the day, and I get that. And you know, the framework proven to work. Is there any sort of different approach that's taken when this isn't a one-off event? So when we're into something that is persistent and is happening on a bi-weekly basis over the course of a year, does that framework change at all, or does the way you look at that change at all? So it becomes not just finding a peaceful resolution to that day, but the larger movement, which is more persistent than just the occurrence that may happen on one given day.
Yep, it sure does. And basically, sometimes, unfortunately, that direction comes from what mayor and council may seek. And then direction comes down from them from another source. And then we, as an organization, have to somehow act on it. So yes, happens in protracted events and land issues. So yeah, we try and mediate it, mitigate it before it gets to that point. And going to that point would be an interesting application.
So not to put too fine of a point on it, but what would you need from us?
Well, not we don't need anything from you. It's basically what chief, sorry, I shouldn't say chief of council, you know, chief of council. Mayor and council, what they would decide to do with some type of application.
Understood?
Yeah.
I'm not sure
Anybody
I
else?
understand that. Do you know what that means?
I think he does.
Yeah.
I can, and we still, legislation has to rule the day though. Everything we do it has to be lawful, right?
I was thinking,
Yeah.
yes.
So I mean, every day is a separate day unto itself as well, where we have to, have information, a criminal investigation, criminal offenses taking place, and then we would investigate everything on its own. If the grounds exist to lay a charge, we certainly lay a charge. And the same goes for any type of provincial offense. We see it happen in front of us. For example, there's been a lot of talk about tailgating and drinking. Well, I have not had any evidence of that presented to me by our officers. And if that were the case, a ticket would be laid. I can guarantee you that. So again, we find that stuff committing, the tickets will be laid 100%.
Picking up on one of Councillor Gushardi's questions too, and I mean, this is something I've heard from members of the public, but you know, issues related to the Highway Traffic Act. And I know we've sort of discussed some of this stuff sort of as one-offs in the past, but could you maybe provide some comment on that just for the benefit of the public?
So perception of what the Highway Traffic Act covers and what it actually covers, it seems are two different things. There is nothing under the Highway Traffic Act that stops someone from standing on the non-traveled portion of the roadway, unless it's a 400 series highway. So people standing on the non-traveled portion of the road, so in parking spots, is not covered by the Highway Traffic Act. It is, however, covered under municipal bylaw. Yes, jaywalking is, but like we said before, we warn about that rather than get heavy-handed. And there has been multiple conversations that have taken place with the organizer. And if we bring something to their attention, we see it stop. And then we do go back and forth and have many conversations. Sorry, I should say bi-weekly. If we were having more conversations about the same issue in one day, that would be a different story, but we're not. This is the King Highway that runs through here. It's the connecting link. So we have had the conversation. You can't block that. That changes jeopardy if you block this section of road. And it hasn't happened since we had that conversation. Not that the road's being blocked, but there was an issue with the crosswalk. And as soon as that was pointed out that we cannot block the Kings Highway, there's no more issue. We watched the traffic flow. There is nothing that is impeding traffic flow. The traffic's backing up, but that has nothing to do with there being a protest. That's just a Saturday in downtown Shelburne. And yeah, like highway traffic, we've looked, in the summertime, we've looked into this and it just isn't covered off under HTA.
Anybody else?
Just a quick question.
Sure.
Just going back to Councilor Bouchardy's question, sorry, Sergeant Phillips, is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned that the Oaks approached you guys and gave you authority. Is that normal practice for private property? They have to give you authority for that?
Yeah, that's correct. Anybody that is in charge of a property would give us the authorization to act on their behalf. So obviously, it is private property. We've been following the developments online as well. And I felt a need to reach out to the administrator today, just to see if they were aware, number one, and they were. And to tell them what their authority is with private property, and by authorizing us, it makes it very clear we can act on their behalf. So that's pretty common for any type of situation where private property is involved.
No, I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure that was clear for public as well, so they were aware that if that's the common practice, if we are aware of something coming up that's on private property, the owners of private property should potentially call in the OPP and address that ahead of time.
Yeah, 100%. We'd rather be involved from the get-go, and information's, there's no bad information, right? We can work with that.
Appreciate it.
Renato?
So maybe follow up a little bit on that. If the town declares the park is that considered private property under the town?
I wouldn't think so. I think the park is generally day-to-day use. Anybody in the public has access to it and can use it. So yeah, a little different, right? Now I think if a park becomes rented and occupied by someone else, obviously they have title to it for that period of time, or whatever the stipulations are with that agreement, your rental agreement, or however that permit works. And then
So that sort of falls back on my original question with the renter. That once that park is rented, it's private property, and at that point, if they're occupied, and as I think that Staff Sergeant Mike said, that charges could be given at that point, or caution and charges if they don't get off that property.
without looking at the bylaw and knowing exactly what it says, the people that have the park permitted, I would think, would have title to that park under those conditions.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions from council? Any wrap-up comments?
I think we've touched it from all four corners today, so I just like to say, I appreciate the council having me here. I love coming here and doing this kind of thing. Like I said, I've lived this for 18 years, and I've seen a lot more than I've ever wanted to see in the way of demonstrations, land claims, and how we deal with these. But I really encourage you to read the national framework and our framework. Once you do that, you'll have a better understanding of how we deal with it and why. So I will get that to mayor and council. And again, thank you. And also thank you for the land acknowledgement.
Thank you. And I mean, I certainly do appreciate the time that you took to be here. And I hope members of the public found the information that you shared useful, whether it satisfies the concerns or not. I can't comment on that, but I do think that at the very least, it's important that members of the public hear directly from you folks. As I said at the outset, I tend to get a lot of these questions. I know some of my colleagues do. We're not police officers. We can't provide the answers. You folks can. So I appreciate you for taking the time to be here and provide those answers that you have. And with that, I would ask for a mover and seconder for a motion to receive, or moved by Councillor Bernardo, seconded by Councillor Sample. All in favor? That's carried. Okay, thank you all. I know.
Take your stuff.
Okay, so our next presentation is from the Shelburne Minor Baseball Association. And I'm not sure who is here representing the group, but whoever is, I would ask to please come forward. Just ask you to speak into the mic so it's picked up. Yeah, and just introduce yourselves. Could you just move a little bit closer? Sorry, thanks.
It's Berkman. I'm the ex-president of, or the former president of the Shelburne Minor Baseball Association.
Hello, I'm Amanda Phillips, and I am the current president of Shelburne Minor Baseball Association.
So as you guys are probably aware by now, Shelburne Minor Baseball almost didn't run. But fortunately, there's Amanda and the team she's assembled. And as a result of that, Shelburne Minor Baseball will be running in town of Shelburne. However, the reason I was not able to sign the contract this year was a problem over out of town fees. I don't live in town. Amanda doesn't live in town. Our kids play. We show up to run a league on behalf of the town. Not even really, sorry, the benefit of the residents of town, not even on behalf of the town. And yeah, we're charged out of town fees. The problem is that, and our comment was that yes, we do have a dispute with the town. And out of an abundance of caution for the safety of our children, we decided to not have a season in the town of Shelburne this year. We have many opportunities and continue to explore, and we're continuing to explore opportunities outside of the town of Shelburne because of the out of town fees. We decided that at the time, the executive at the time decided that we wouldn't operate inside the town of Shelburne. Now, so I think the big question is what are the out of town fees for? They give it lots of different reasons. And yet, off the backs of the clubs, Shelburne Minor Baseball, Shelburne Soccer, the town has been growing. The town has had the luxury of growing off the backs of these organizations that bring all these people from out of town into the community to spend money to allow the businesses to fund. And yet we had charged out of town fees. We're a private organization, which the town has always been perfectly clear. We're a private organization. As president or the contract signers of these contracts for rental inside the town, we put ourselves on the line. You make us mandatory as contractually obligated, it's actually selling kids information to you. to give you this information you didn't have, we're a private organization, we said, we accept all liability. When we sign that contract. We assume all liability for anything that goes on. And yet we're a private organization, we have to have private insurance, we have to pay all this stuff. And yes, when I was in dispute with the town, I was in dispute with the town, and somebody from the town said, well, tell your parents you haven't paid dues yet. I said, I was in dispute. I says, you haven't settled my dispute yet. And as soon as I realized that the town was only about the money, I said, here, we're still in dispute. Here's the money. That dispute that you think that we mutually have, settled, done. So, but however, what the public apparently heard was very slanderous in nature, but I'm not going to repeat that. Against my character. But the out of town fees, we're giving private information to you. And you've apparently passed a bylaw that gives you the opportunity to collect that information. Yet we're a private organization, do not come by this data during the normal course of operation.
So Mark, just so I can sort of move this along a little bit, is the question, what is the rationale of the out of town fees?
Well, first of all, what is the rationale of the out of town fees?
Yeah.
And how would we be in the day of cyber attacks and information mining? How can we be made to put our kids at jeopardy? And that is what is at stake here. By providing information for our kids that play the sport out of town fees, like you manually review it. We've gone to several organizations, some cited fraudulently by the town, and I don't use that term lightly.
Nor should you.
Where we've gone to the organization that have been cited by town as charging out of town basis for these out of town fees. And what do we find? Oh, there's no out of town fees, we don't pay them. We're an independent organization. We don't turn that over to the municipality because they mandate it. They don't legislate their way into this data. Right?
Okay, so to answer your question, I'll answer the initial one, which is what is the rationale for out of town fees, and that's quite simple. Parks within the town of Shelburne are funded through tax dollars. Residents from within the town of Shelburne pay tax dollars. They're collected by the municipality. We then use those funds to maintain parks, build equipment, maintain that equipment. The rationale for out of town fees is that, although we're more than happy to welcome kids from outlying municipalities, whether it's Melanchthon Township, Amaranth Township, Mono, Mulmer, what have you, we're more than welcoming of those individuals. But the idea is that their parents are not contributing taxes to the town of Shelburne. Therefore, a $15, and let's not lose sight of that, a $15 out of town surcharge is applied to town or to children who do not live within the town of Shelburne. And the notion is that very modest surcharge helps contribute to the funds that are necessary for the upkeep and the maintenance of the parks and the facilities. I'm sure you found when you were surveying other communities, Orangeville charges out of town surcharges, New Tecumseh charges out of town surcharges. I would even hazard to say that in both cases, they're probably much higher than $15 per child athlete. I'm going to let my CAO sort of provide a more wholesome response in respect to the collection of information, but in order to determine which players live within the town of Shelburne proper and which don't, i.e. which children are going to be paying out of town surcharges, we need to at the very least determine the residency. So with that, I'll turn it over to our CAO to provide a bit more detail.
Thank you, Mayor Mills. So you had referenced some communication, and it was myself actually, and of the dialogue that encouraged you to please share all of the emails between yourself and my colleagues and myself. We wanted to ensure that there was accountability and transparency with respect to those discussions. I had asked that do the parents know that you've asked for refunds? Also asked later that you had asked not only for non-resident refunds, but all of these to be refunded. We also, as staff, provided you with the agencies at the provincial level because you were concerned about the authority of the town to collect information on a roster-based approach. We gave you those links. I believe you did, because you referenced in an article in the banner that you had not yet had a decision from the IPC. You might wish to share that decision if you have it with you. And that really is the basis of the dispute. You had two issues that you wanted to resolve with us. You didn't want to pay because you said you had a dispute. We actually advised you, and it was at this meeting, that myself, my colleagues, and members of council were getting contacted by the community because they were being told that there was a dispute with the town and nobody really knew what that dispute was. So we asked that they in turn talk to Shelburne Minor Baseball. And that's when I suggested again that you actually disclose all of the emails to give back dialogue. I had also asked you to please give us contacts of the remainder of the executive, and you asked why, and I explained because we're dealing with one person, yourself, and it's quite usual with associations that on their website or on their Facebook that their executive or the decision makers of that organization are known. So therefore, we know who we're dealing with as well. And I had also sent you as a courtesy when you explained that, there were many families that you personally supported and giving you complete, credit and appreciation for that, that other organizations, and I gave you those links, share Jumpstart from Canadian Tire, share all of the funds that not-for-profits provide to families in need to offset all of those costs. So that is included. And at the side, it was also mentioned I think at this council meeting, that a number of other communities supplement non-resident fees for their own taxpayer. So for example, we as the town of Shelburne, for those families that might use aquatics in the town of Orangeville in the winter, we have a fund that you would apply for as a non-resident fee supplement. We would suggest that Mono, Amaranth, maybe those communities also have non-resident fees for the $15 surcharge. We have an allocation policy. Council recently approved the fees, and in there was the non-resident fee moving from $15, and I should clarify, it's plus HST to from 12 to 15. So is that enough of a background? So that's what, so I was the primary person you were dealing with probably for the last 4 communications. You started with my colleagues in our administrative office. You dealt with my colleague, my treasurer, and those were the team that you had, and as well, all of council was copied on my emails to yourself.
In response to that, first of all, in my investigation, so I had a very in-depth conversation with Orangeville Headwater. And what it was determined was, yes, there is out of towns. However, it is not a roster for personal information. It is if you only get charged an out of town fee if the amount of the residents, if the percentage of the residencies or percentage of the players, the percentage of the people playing was not 60% or higher, then there was an out of town fee applied. And only on the 60% margin. If you're about 60% people in Orangeville, there is no out of town. Because it's a service for the public of Orangeville, whether or not it's an independent organization or a municipal run organization.
And sure, Mark, I mean, I'm sure each municipality has a different model of collecting, out of town surcharges. And I mean, I don't want to get into a debate about which model is better. I mean, the fact is that the model that we have is the one that's been endorsed by this council, and that's the one that all user groups using facilities within the town of Shelburne abide by until it's changed. I mean, if you're if your advocacy is, to have us consider a change in our model, that's a suggestion that I guess we could take up, but as it stands right now, the model we have is the model we have. And not only Shelburne Minor Baseball, but any other organization has to live by that model.
I understand that. Now, why, when we're a private organization, do you have the right to do so? You don't come across that in any natural order of business.
Our right is derived from our power of bylaw, which is enshrined in the municipal act. So we pass a user fee bylaw, and contained in that bylaw, we have an out of town surcharge. So the legal right, if that's what you want to get to, is derived from our powers under the municipal act.
He also said he could.
Let me set it back for a second. Do you know that if a user group came in from the town of Hamilton and rented the exact same fields, the exact same diamonds, they get charged, let's say our fee is $1,000. They only have to pay $1,200, where because we have 70% of the people are in Shelburne and 30% of the people are outside of Shelburne, we end up paying $1,600 towards those fees. That's a discriminatory. That's systemic discrimination, really. And that's what the IPC had told me, that if it's systemic, there's a case to be made, and it is systemic in nature. There is systemic discrimination going on here. And whether or not you choose to acknowledge it or not, is not an issue.
Do you have a copy of the IPC decision, Mark?
I can email it.
No, so just to clarify, the town does have a copy. And I just want to also clarify in our email correspondence, I also provided you with the option, if you were uncomfortable with remitting the electronic information for the roster, that you could provide a hard copy and you could provide it. And we also would destroy it after, similar to destroying the electronic version. The roster is a requirement of this community. It is the way that the non-resident fee is validated. There was a decision that the city of Oshawa went through in the past. I think it was in 2016. We know that you filed with the IPC, you referenced it in the article. If you could literally read us the decision, if not, we're happy to, that would be fantastic. Okay, so the mayor will read it.
Go ahead and want to read the relevant section.
Or Jennifer, do you want to read it as the clerk? Yeah, I'm gonna let the clerk read it. Oh, I have. Okay, sorry, I take my glasses off. Okay, so I'll just paraphrase that the office received your request on January the 24th at the Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner Ontario, always known as the IPC. And in your complaint, you stated the following: the Shelburne Minor Baseball is a private independent organization providing baseball to the youth of Shelburne and the surrounding area. Minor Baseball rents diamonds from the town. Other than this, there is no involvement from the town, yet the town demands the submission of full team rosters with the names and addresses of participants, so they may charge Minor Baseball without out-of-town fees. The town has explained that pursuant to a bylaw passed, that the collection of this information is allowed. And then the fourth bullet, to resolve your complaint, you indicate that Minor Baseball is looking to have an opinion on whether the collection of information violates the act, as the town has been collecting and using this information for over a decade from information collected from Minor Baseball and other town clubs. Section 46F of the Act authorizes the IPC to receive presentations from the public concerning the operation of the Act. The IPC does not have the power to make an order against an institution, issue fines, award damages, or require that an institution discipline its staff members as a result of a privacy breach. The IPC's purpose for reviewing privacy complaints made under the Act is primarily future-oriented. If the IPC decides to process a privacy complaint and it is established that there was a privacy breach, the IPC can make recommendations that assist the institution in taking remedial steps to prevent similar occurrences in the future. The IPC has at its discretion to decide if a complaint should be reviewed. The commissioner has delegated authority to me, who is the person who signed, which is Lisa Kwong, analyst with the IPC, whether a privacy complaint should be proceeded through the complaint process. I have carefully reviewed your complaint and understand that this matter is important to you. However, the IPC's purpose for reviewing privacy complaints, the IPC's restricted mandate and the policy and privacy matters, and the circumstances you described, I have decided that it will not proceed through the complaint process. Even if it was determined that an alleged privacy breach occurred, it does not appear that the proceeding with this complaint would result in this office making any substantial remedial recommendations to the institution. Please note that while the IPC is not looking into your complaint, we will do all privacy complaint. We do review all privacy complaints received and are monitoring for like issues. If it is noted that the issue you have raised is reoccurring or suggest, as you just mentioned, a systematic issue with the institution, the IPC will consider investigating. There is no appeal or reconsideration mechanism relating to the closure of privacy complaints under this act.
So I guess that's it, Mark. I mean, you know, as it stands right now, the IPC, you know, has made pretty clear what their position is. As I said, and as pointed out in the decision, you know, these fees in one form or another have been charged in the town of Shelburne in a number of other communities, perhaps in different ways, but they've been charged for over a decade. And all minor sports groups have been operating seemingly without dispute. So as I said earlier, and at the risk of repeating myself, this is the regime we have to deal with right now. So that's the one that we're going to operate under. By all means, if you would like to propose, we look at some other model, you know, that's something that we can take up for future years. But as it stands right now, that's the model we have. And the legitimacy of it has been substantiated by the IPC. So I'll let you make a few closing comments, but we do have to move on with the agenda.
So, the municipal act that you're referring to is section 28(2). Municipal Freedom of Information Act, is that correct?
No, the Municipal Act. The Municipal Act is the act that delegates authorities from the province to municipalities. And one of those powers that are delegated to municipalities is to enact bylaws. This council enacted a rates and fees bylaw. And within that bylaw, we've determined that it's appropriate to charge an out-of-town surcharge. So our legal authority to do that stems from the authorities given in the Municipal Act.
And the ability for private organizations to be asked to be municipal washrooms in order to run. Which has also been an act.
That's another issue. And no, there were some suggestions made during COVID that user groups, as a courtesy to those using the facilities, take some precautions to wipe things down. That's a separate issue, but.
It was almost mandated to us.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to summarize?
Can I ask a quick question? So I just want to make sure that I understand. I'm not familiar with municipal politics, so I just want to make sure that I understand. So the bylaw, you guys are allowed to enact bylaws through your processes, which then gives you the legal authority to say, okay, any user group, not just baseball, all user groups in Shelburne need to remit this information as a condition of renting a facility in town. So I just want to clarify, or just for my own understanding, that user groups are we put in a legal predicament that we are releasing private information to a third party? I just want to make sure that we are not put in any compromising position, because you have the legal authority under your municipal bylaws and such to ask for this information. But do we as private organizations, are we legally allowed to then give you that information?
I mean, It's a bit of a difficult question because what you're asking for in essence is legal advice, which we can't provide to Shelburne Minor Baseball. I mean, you know, if you wanted to be absolutely sure, then, you know, the association would have to seek some legal advice. But when you collect registrations from your members, I'm assuming you collect that information.
Yeah.
Right. So, you know, in the same vein, we're asking, you know, you're essentially registering with the town of Shelburne to rent our facilities. We're asking for similar information.
But our members are not registered with the town of Shelburne because we're a private organization. So as
The
a
organization doesn't own any facility, right? So it's understood that by registering through Shelburne Minor Baseball and they're going to be playing within the town of Shelburne, they'll be using public facilities owned by the town of Shelburne.
So there's sort of like an understanding chain there that because we're using the town of Shelburne facilities, therefore parents and not just parents, but also any user group, even adults who play baseball or adults whoever, there should be some kind of understanding that you're now relinquishing your information to the town of Shelburne just by proxy of registering for a league in town.
I might be able to help. So through the town's allocation policy,
Yeah.
and we would encourage you to share that with your parents. That is actually, that's actually so one of the things that's required is the provision of a roster. It also provides you with the type of information. We don't need, you know, all the details that you're collecting. We need information just to validate that there's an address and where that person lives. And like I mentioned before, you don't have to send it electronically. If you would simply like to provide it because of the fear of theft of data of children, you can remit it hard copy. But that is a condition of the permit, and that's not provided, then the permit's not valid. So that's the authority. And then we've also, under the Freedom of Information Act and AMFIPA, we have, as a municipal government, there is significant legislative oversight of what we're allowed to have, how we're allowed to keep it, and how we dispose of it. So I think the clerk had provided that information, or actually I think the treasurer, on the authority of the town to collect that information. I can assure you that we're not collecting the scope of information that we collect from a taxpayer. As a municipal government, it is the protection of information is something that we are entrusted with on a day-to-day basis by many people that are using the services of the town, whether it's water and other services. So I guess the crux of this is, in order for the organization to book the field and use our parks in 2023, there's a couple of things you need to ensure that you're willing to support. You will need to pay for those applicable children a non-resident fee at some point. You will have to sign a permit. If not, you don't have the allocation approved. And the applicable option is that time will be then given to another organization. So that really is the heart of it. We've just gone through the allocation process for the first time, and my colleagues have given out or looked at the distribution of the requests for time, and we'll be forming that up. So you need to confirm if you're playing in Shelburne or not, and provide the applicable permits.
Yeah, I already have.
Okay, fantastic.
So the Mayor Wade bill, your suggestion then is to kind of investigate what legal ramifications there could be for any league really, and if we have the authority to actually give out personal information, even though you've requested it as a condition of renting any facility in town.
Not exactly. What I'm saying, you asked if Shelburne Minor Baseball would be open to any potential liability. And what I'm saying is we can't provide that kind of legal advice. So if the association wants some assurances from a legal point of view, then the association would have to seek that advice themselves. We
So
can't provide that.
You as council don't know if you're putting users at risk then.
I can assure you that substantial precaution is being taken so that doesn't happen. And as the CAO said, we regularly and routinely collect and retain and manage personal information. So I can assure you that there are appropriate safeguards in place to make sure that breaches don't happen. But your question was, is Shelburne Minor Baseball open to any liability if there was a breach? And what I'm saying is I can't provide you with that assurance.
I didn't mean if there was a breach. What I meant was, are we actually legally allowed to provide you the information?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. As per our bylaw.
Okay, Mark, this will be the last comment.
So the follow-up question, based on Amanda's line of questioning, is in the event that there is a breach, does the town of Shelburne, should there be lawsuits as a result of giving this information, assume all legal liability at that point? Because if you don't, then we have because you've asked for it, you've asked for the child's information, you put the children in jeopardy. And
For a name, I mean, and an address.
Again, Mark, you're asking essentially for legal advice. I mean, I can't provide to you any information as to how a court may view the chain of liability. So that's a question. If you have legitimate concerns about this, then I suggest strongly that you seek legal advice for your organization. Councillor Sample, did you have a question or a comment?
I do have a comment. So I'll take you into the soccer life. So it's not, we supply a roster, OSA, the ASW, all of associations that are linked to the soccer association. They get the rosters.
Yep.
They ask for rosters. Town of Shelburne asks for rosters. So once the rosters reach here, then it becomes our responsibility, same as OSA, all the communications you do about. If you were part of the Ontario baseball organization, they would ask you also for that information.
Yeah.
So it's no different than what we're asking for or what they're asking for. We're giving it to them. We give them everything when roster happens. And it's put in a database, and that's how they charge their fees for the insurance that we get from them. And you should know that.
Yes.
So that's how that is all handled, and all that information is handled through everybody's organization.
My point was that the OSA, that all the professional organizations not only have security, have insurance around that. But they also come about that as through the natural order of business. Because kids want to play in leagues, tournaments, or whatever. If I understand your answer correctly, is that if the leak happens, if there's a compromisation as a result of sending this information to you, the town of Shelburne does take all of it upon themselves.
We have insurance. So,
Where did the breach happen?
exactly.
Okay, we're getting into far too many hypotheticals here, so I am gonna draw this to an end. I do sincerely thank you both for the time and dedication that you put into Shelburne Minor Baseball, and I mean that, I really do sincerely mean that. I mean, if it were not for volunteers like you, these organizations would not exist. And our children, whether they're from the town of Shelburne or from surrounding communities, would not be afforded the opportunity to play minor sports. So I appreciate everything you do. And as I said, you know, if your beef is with the model that we've chosen to pursue, then by all means, we're open to considering an alternative model. For the time being, the model we have is the model we have, and that's the one that we all live by. So with that, I'll ask for a mover and seconder for a motion to receive the presentation from Shelburne Minor Baseball. Councillor Sample, seconded by Councillor Fegan. All in favor? That's carried. All right, and I have been requested by one of our councillor colleagues for a brief break. So let's take 5 minutes to stretch our legs and get back at it.